Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
My name is Clara David, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought I wanted and found everything I actually needed. 4 years ago, I was Clara Easton, living what I believed was a perfect life. I had a husband who brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, a cozy apartment filled with secondhand furniture we'd lovingly restored together, and dreams of the house we'd buy once we saved enough for a down payment. I worked part-time as a freelance accountant, managing books for small businesses, while Jake climbed the corporate ladder at Mansfield Motors. I thought we were building something beautiful together. I thought I knew what love looked like. I was wrong about everything. But sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most extraordinary transformations. Sometimes losing the life you planned opens the door to the life you were meant to live. This is that story. I should have known something was wrong when Jake started working late every Tuesday night without fail, coming home with the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. But on that Sunday evening in late February, I was blissfully unaware that my 7-year marriage was about to implode spectacularly. I was curled up on our secondhand couch, laptop balanced on my knees, finishing up the monthly books for Peterson's Hardware. The familiar comfort of numbers filled my screen, neat columns that always added up, unlike the messy unpredictability of real life. Jake emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the marshmallows already melting into sweet clouds. Even after 7 years of marriage, he still remembered I liked mine with extra cinnamon. These small gestures were what I treasured about our quiet Sunday evenings. No obligations, no pressure. Just us. Thompson's account is finally caught up, I said, closing the laptop and accepting the warm mug gratefully. Mrs. Peterson will be thrilled. She was worried they'd have to let someone go. Jake settled beside me, his weight causing the old couch springs to creak in their familiar way. You're amazing, you know that? The way you care about every client like their family. I leaned into his shoulder, breathing in his cologne, the same woody scent he'd worn since our college days. Everything felt so normal, so secure. We'd been talking about starting a family soon, maybe next year when we had enough saved for the down payment on a house. Jake had gotten promoted to regional sales manager at Mansfield Motors 8 months ago, and my part-time accounting work was thriving. Life felt like it was finally falling into place. Remember when we thought we'd never be able to afford a place bigger than this apartment? I gestured around our small living room with its mismatched furniture and hand-me-down decorations. Hey, I love this place, Jake said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Our first real home together. I was about to remind him that technically our first place had been that awful studio near campus when the doorbell rang. We both froze. It was 9:17 p.m. on a Sunday. Who visits at 9:17 p.m. on a Sunday? Were you expecting someone? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jake's face had gone pale, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted fear. No, nobody. His voice came out rough, strangled. The doorbell rang again, followed by 3 sharp, insistent knocks. I'll get it, I said, setting down my mug, padding to the door in my fuzzy slippers. Through the peephole, I could make out a woman's silhouette, but the porch light cast strange shadows that made it hard to see clearly. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Standing on my doorstep was Eliza Dawson, Jake's ex-girlfriend from college. I recognized her immediately, though I'd only met her once, briefly at a mutual friend's party years ago. Jake had awkwardly introduced her as Eliza, my ex from college, and I remembered the uncomfortable way he'd shifted when he said it. I'd thought it was sweet that he was being so transparent about their history, introducing her honestly rather than just as a friend. I remembered thinking how beautiful she was, with her auburn hair and confident smile, and feeling a small, stupid pang of jealousy that Jake had dated someone so effortlessly glamorous. But the woman standing before me now looked nothing like the polished professional from that party. Her hair was disheveled, her mascara slightly smudged, and her coat hung open despite the chilly February evening. And she was very, very pregnant. At least 8 months along, by my estimation. Clara, she said, her voice breathless like she'd been running. I need to talk to you and Jake. It's important. Behind me, I heard Jake's sharp intake of breath. When I turned, he was standing in the doorway to the living room, his face white as paper, gripping the doorframe like he might collapse without it. "Eliza," he whispered. The way he said her name, soft, intimate, terrified, made my stomach drop. "Can I come in?" Eliza asked, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "Please, we need to talk." I stepped aside without thinking, my mind struggling to process what was happening. Jake's ex-girlfriend, heavily pregnant, at our door on a Sunday night, looking like her world was ending. As she walked past me into our living room, I caught Jake's eye. The guilt written across his face hit me like a physical blow, even though I didn't yet understand what he was guilty of. Eliza settled heavily onto our couch, the same couch where Jake and I had been planning our future just moments before. She looked around the room, taking in our modest life with an expression I couldn't read. "I'm sorry to come here like this," she began, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "But I couldn't wait any longer. I've been trying to figure out what to do, and—" She looked up at Jake, who hadn't moved from the doorway. "Jake, tell her. Please, I can't do this alone anymore." "Tell me what?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but something cold was spreading through my chest, a terrible knowing that I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands were shaking. "Jake." Eliza's voice was firm now, almost commanding. "Tell your wife that you're going to be a father." The world tilted sideways. I looked at Jake, waiting for him to laugh, to say this was some kind of sick joke, to explain how his ex-girlfriend could possibly be pregnant with his child, when he came home to me every night, when we shared the same bed, the same dreams, the same future. But Jake just stood there, tears streaming down his face, and said the words that shattered my entire world. "Clara, I'm so sorry. It's true." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock on the kitchen wall ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Jake's words echoed in my head like a broken record. "It's true. It's true. It's true." "What do you mean it's true?" My voice sounded strange, detached, like it was coming from someone else. "What's true? That she's—" I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't make my mouth form the words that would make this nightmare real. Eliza shifted on the couch, wincing slightly as she adjusted her position. 8 months pregnant, I realized with a sick jolt. 8 months. I started counting backward, my accounting brain automatically calculating dates even as my heart was breaking. June. This started in June. "Clara, please sit down," Jake said, taking a tentative step toward me. His face was blotchy and red, tears still flowing freely. "Let me explain." "Don't." The word exploded out of me with such force that both Jake and Eliza jumped. "Don't you dare tell me to sit down in my own living room while your pregnant mistress makes herself comfortable on my couch." Jake flinched as if I'd slapped him. Good. I wanted him to hurt. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the agony that was currently ripping through my chest. 8 months, I continued, my voice rising with each word. 8 months, Jake. You've been screwing your ex-girlfriend for 8 months while coming home to me every night, while making love to me, while talking about our future, our house, our babies. Clara, I never meant for this to happen. Jake started. Oh, what? You just accidentally fell into bed with her? I was screaming now, completely beyond caring what the neighbors might think. Multiple times over 8 months? Eliza cleared her throat. Actually, Clara, I think you should know. I wasn't talking to you. I whirled around to face her, fury boiling over. You don't get to speak in my home. You don't get to sit there with your pregnant belly and act like some innocent victim. Eliza's composure cracked slightly, her confident mask slipping. I know you're upset. Upset? I laughed, high and hysterical. Upset is when they run out of my favorite coffee at the store. Upset is when it rains on the weekend. This is my husband telling me he's been living a double life while I planned our anniversary dinner and worried about whether we could afford new curtains. I spun back to Jake, who looked like he was about to vomit. Every Tuesday, right? All those late nights at the dealership, all those times you came home tired and distant, and I made excuses for you because I thought you were working hard for us? Jake's face crumpled. Clara, please. Please what? Please forgive you. Please understand. Please make this easier for you. My voice cracked on the last word, and I felt the tears coming, hot and angry and unstoppable. I trusted you. I trusted you completely. I never questioned you, never doubted you, never even looked at another man because I thought we were building something together. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, hating that I was crying in front of them. How long has this been going on? Don't lie to me. I deserve the truth, even if you couldn't give it to me before. Jake looked at Eliza, some silent communication passing between them that made me want to scream again. They had their own language now, their own secrets, their own bond. Since she started working at Mansfield Motors, Jake whispered, in June. 8 months, I said flatly. You've been cheating on me for 8 months. It wasn't supposed to happen, Jake said desperately. She came back to town, she needed a job, and we worked closely together. I tried to stay away, Clara, I swear I did, but we started talking and you decided to sleep with her despite the wedding ring on your finger, I finished coldly. Eliza shifted uncomfortably. Clara, I want you to know that I never intended for this to happen either. Jake and I have a history, yes, but when I came back to town, I wasn't looking to break up anyone's marriage. I stared at her incredulously. But you did it anyway. We tried to fight it, she continued, her voice taking on a defensive edge. But there was still something between us. The connection we had in college, it never really went away. So you decided to act on it while he was married to someone else, I said, my voice dangerously quiet now. You decided that your feelings were more important than my marriage, my life, my future. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you moved back to town, wormed your way into my husband's workplace, seduced him, and got yourself knocked up. And now you're here, on my doorstep, destroying my life because what? It got too hard to keep the secret? Eliza's composure finally snapped. I'm here because I'm 8 months pregnant, and Jake has been avoiding making any decisions about this baby. I've been doing this alone while he goes home to you every night and pretends nothing has changed. Because nothing should have changed, I screamed. He shouldn't have been with you in the first place. But he was, Eliza shot back, struggling to stand up from the couch. He chose to be with me, Clara. Every Tuesday, every stolen moment, every time he told you he was working late, he was choosing me. The words hit like physical blows. I looked at Jake, waiting for him to deny it, to say she was wrong, to fight for our marriage. But he just stood there, looking broken and helpless. Is that true? I asked him quietly. Did you choose her? Jake's silence stretched on for an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. I was confused. I love you, Clara, but being with Eliza again, it brought back all these feelings I thought I'd buried. Something inside me died in that moment. The last shred of hope I'd been clinging to, that this was some terrible mistake, some momentary lapse in judgment, crumbled to ash. Get out, I said quietly. Clara. Jake started. Get out, I screamed, pointing toward the door. Both of you, get out of my house right now. We need to talk about this, Eliza said, one hand on her belly. About the baby, about what happens next. I don't want to hear another word from you, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You're not my problem. This baby isn't my problem. Figure it out yourselves. Clara, please, Jake begged. We can work through this. We can figure out how to what? How to co-parent with your mistress. How to explain to everyone that my husband got his ex-girlfriend pregnant. How to pretend that any of this is okay. I walked to the front door and yanked it open, cold air rushing into the warm apartment. Get out now. Jake looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, I said, and for the first time in 7 years of marriage, I meant it. Go to her place, go to a hotel, go to hell, just get away from me. Eliza gathered her purse and coat, moving slowly due to her pregnancy. As she passed me, she paused. Clara, I know you hate me right now, but this baby. Don't, I warned. Don't you dare try to make me care about that baby. You made your choice when you decided to sleep with my husband. Deal with the consequences. After they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs finally giving out. I slid down to the floor and sobbed. Ugly, broken sobs that came from somewhere deep inside me I didn't know existed. My marriage was over. My future was gone. And somewhere out there, Jake's baby was growing inside another woman, a living, breathing reminder that the man I'd loved more than anything had chosen someone else. I don't know how long I sat on that cold hardwood floor, crying until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. Eventually, the tears stopped coming. Not because the pain had lessened, but because my body simply had nothing left to give. The silence in the apartment was deafening. No Jake humming in the shower, no sound of him making his terrible coffee in the morning. Just me, alone, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer existed. I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Clara. It's Eliza. I got your number from Jake's phone. We need to talk about some practical matters. Call me when you're ready to be an adult about this situation." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. The audacity of this woman was breathtaking. Before I could decide whether to respond, another text came through. "I know this is hard for you, but Jake and I are going to be together now. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." Then another. "By the way, you might want to get a lawyer. Jake's going to owe substantial child support. Hope you're ready to downsize that cute little apartment." I threw my phone across the room, watching it skitter under the coffee table. But even from there, I could hear it buzzing with more incoming messages. When I finally crawled over to retrieve it 20 minutes later, there were 6 more texts. "Jake feels terrible about hurting you, but he's excited about the baby. We both are. I hope you know this isn't personal. Jake and I just have something you two never had. Real passion, real connection, the kind of love that makes people risk everything. You seem like a nice person, Clara. You'll find someone who's actually right for you someday. Someone who won't need to look elsewhere for what's missing at home. We're thinking of a spring wedding. Nothing too fancy. We'll need to save money for the baby, but I'm sure you understand." My vision blurred with rage and fresh tears. A spring wedding. She was already planning to marry my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, while their baby was still growing inside her. I wanted to respond, to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her smug little messages. But what was the point? She was right about one thing. Jake had made his choice. And instead of fighting for a man who clearly didn't want to be fought for, I was going to make damn sure I got everything I deserved in the divorce. Let Jake marry his pregnant mistress. Let him deal with her manipulation and cruelty for the rest of his life. But he was going to pay for destroying mine. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Jennifer Walsh, the divorce attorney Andrea had used in her first marriage. It was past midnight, but I left a voicemail anyway. "Mrs. Walsh, this is Clara Easton. My sister Andrea Simon referred me to you. I need to file for divorce immediately, and I want to take my husband for everything he's worth. Please call me back as soon as possible." After I hung up, I blocked Eliza's number and Jake's too. If they wanted to communicate with me, they could do it through lawyers from now on. The next 4 months were a blur of lawyer meetings, paperwork, and Eliza's relentless psychological warfare. After I blocked her first number, she simply got new ones. When I blocked those, she switched to email. When I created filters for those, she started using different email addresses. The messages never stopped. Photos of her growing belly with captions like, "Jake's so excited to be a real father." Pictures of them at doctor's appointments. Screenshots of baby furniture they were buying. Each message was designed to twist the knife a little deeper. "Jake says the baby kicks whenever it hears his voice. Such a strong connection already. We're thinking of naming him Jacob Jr. if it's a boy. Jake's so proud. Our wedding dress shopping was so fun. Jake says I look radiant. Being truly loved really does make a woman glow." Eliza gave birth to Jacob Jr. in October, right on schedule. The final straw came a week after the baby was born. A selfie of them both in the hospital, beaming at the camera with their newborn son between them. They looked so happy, so perfect, so completely unburdened by the destruction they'd left in their wake. For a moment, I stared at that photo and felt the familiar urge to respond, to tell them both exactly what I thought of their twisted little fairy tale. But then I realized that's exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to respond like a bitter ex-wife, to give her ammunition to show how crazy and jealous his former wife was. Instead, I sent one final email. "Dear Eliza, you got what you wanted. If you contact me again in any form, I will pursue legal action for harassment. My lawyer assures me we have more than enough evidence. Just like magic, the messages stopped after that. When the divorce was finally finalized in June, the first thing I did was go to the courthouse and legally change my name back to Clara David. Seeing Clara David on my driver's license felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost. I wasn't Jake's wife anymore. I was just me, and that was enough. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought kept nagging at me. In all of Eliza's cruel messages, she'd been right about one thing. I did deserve someone who was actually right for me. Someone who wouldn't need to look elsewhere for what was missing. The question was, did someone like that even exist? Or was I destined to always be the safe choice, the backup plan, the woman men settled for until something better came along? I fell asleep with tears on my pillow and a growing determination that I would never, ever let anyone make me feel this small again. 3 years passed. 3 long years of rebuilding my life piece by piece, learning to trust my own judgment again, and discovering who Clara David really was when she wasn't trying to be the perfect wife. I threw myself into work, taking on every client I could find. My freelance accounting business grew steadily, and I moved out of the apartment that held too many memories into a charming one-bedroom place across town. I traveled, something Jake had never been interested in. I took cooking classes, learned to paint, joined a book club. Slowly, carefully, I built a life that was entirely my own. Jake and Eliza had gotten married, just as she'd planned. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd had a small ceremony, hampered by financial constraints and the awkwardness of everyone knowing how their relationship had started. By now, their son, Jacob Jr., would be almost 3 years old. I didn't think about them much anymore. That chapter of my life felt like it belonged to someone else, a naive woman who believed in fairy tales and happily ever after. I was stronger now, wiser, more independent. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. I was content with my solitude, my success, my carefully constructed peace, which is why I was so surprised when my phone rang on a Tuesday morning in January and the caller ID showed an unknown number. "Hello, this is Clara." "Hi, Clara. This is Lori Stevens from HR at Mansfield Motors. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from one of our clients who spoke very highly of your accounting work." I frowned. "I'm sorry. Which client recommended me?" "Patterson Electronics. Their owner, Bill Patterson, mentioned you're excellent with small business accounting and might be interested in a full-time position. Our company head accountant just resigned, and we're in desperate need of someone who can handle payroll, taxes, financial reporting, the whole package." My heart sank slightly. Mansfield Motors, Jake's company. Though after 3 years, I wasn't sure if he even still worked there. People moved on, careers changed. Still, the idea of working for his employer felt strange. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure it would be a good fit." "Oh, may I ask why?" "The salary is quite competitive. We're talking about a significant step up from freelance work. Full benefits, vacation time, retirement matching." I could hear the confusion in her voice. She had no idea about my connection to the company's past drama. "It's personal reasons. I'm afraid I can't work in your office environment." There was a pause. "Would you be open to a remote arrangement? I know it's unusual, but given your reputation and our current situation, we might be able to make it work. You're highly recommended to us. You'd need to come in perhaps once a month for meetings, but otherwise, you could work from home." I hesitated. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was exactly what I needed to take my career to the next level. After 3 years of freelancing, the stability of a corporate position with benefits was appealing. But working for the company where my ex-husband might still be employed felt like tempting fate. "I don't know," I said slowly. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, take your time. But I should mention, the head of accounting position comes with significant autonomy and leadership responsibilities. You'd be managing a small team, setting policies, reporting directly to our VP of operations. It's really a fantastic opportunity for the right person." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Bill Patterson had recommended me. That was gratifying. He was one of my best clients, and his endorsement carried weight. The salary Lori had mentioned would be probably almost double what I was making freelancing. With that kind of income, I could afford a house, maybe even start that retirement fund I'd been putting off. But could I really work for Jake's company? After 3 years, the thought of him didn't bring the sharp pain it once had, but it still felt complicated. What if we ended up in meetings together? What if Eliza was still working there too? Then again, maybe it was time to stop letting them have power over my choices. I'd rebuilt my life from scratch, created something beautiful and strong. Why should I turn down an amazing opportunity because of ghosts from my past? I thought about it for 2 days before calling Lori back. I've reconsidered, I told her. I'd like to discuss the remote position. When can we set up an interview? 3 days later, I found myself sitting in the parking lot of Mansfield Motors' corporate building, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to calm my nerves. The HR office was in a separate building from the main showroom, Lori had assured me, but that didn't stop my heart from racing at the thought of potentially running into Jake. I took a deep breath and checked my appearance in the rearview mirror one more time. Professional blazer, hair pulled back in a neat bun, minimal makeup. I looked competent, confident, which was exactly what I was, even if my nerves were getting the better of me. The corporate building was sleek and modern, a far cry from the small office space I'd imagined. Lori met me in the lobby with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, Clara, but I have a family emergency I need to handle. Steve Mansfield, our VP of Operations, has agreed to conduct your interview instead. I hope that's okay?" My stomach dropped. Steve Mansfield. I had a vague memory of meeting him years ago. Jake had introduced us briefly at some company function. Would he remember me? Would he know about the divorce, the scandal? "Of course," I managed to say, following Lori to the elevator. She led me to a corner office on the 3rd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Behind a massive desk sat a man who made my breath catch. Tall, dark hair with touches of silver at the temples, sharp jawline, and the kind of confident presence that commanded attention. He looked up when we entered, and his smile was warm and genuinely welcoming. "Miss David, thank you for coming in." Steve stood and extended his hand. His handshake was firm, professional, and his dark eyes held a kindness that immediately put me at ease. "I apologize for the last-minute change. I hope you don't mind meeting with me instead of Lori." "Not at all," I replied, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for taking the time to see me. I have to say, your resume is impressive. Multiple clients, consistent growth in your business, excellent references." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those intelligent dark eyes. "Bill Patterson speaks very highly of your work. He says you've saved his company thousands of dollars in tax optimization alone." I felt a flush of pride. I enjoy the puzzle aspect of it, finding inefficiencies, streamlining processes. There's something satisfying about making numbers work better. "That's exactly what we need here." Steve leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. "Our previous accountant left things in quite a state. We need someone who can come in, assess the situation, and implement real solutions. As head of accounting, you'd be reporting directly to me as VP of Operations, but I'm curious, why the hesitation about working in our office? We have a beautiful corner office available with a great view. Most people would be excited about that." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. How much should I reveal? "It's personal reasons." Steve nodded slowly, and I could see he wasn't going to let it go that easily. "I understand personal reasons, but as the head of our accounting department, you'd be managing a team of 3. It would be helpful for team cohesion if you were here more than once a month." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. The last thing I wanted was to air my personal drama in a job interview, but something about Steve's steady gaze made me feel like honesty might actually be okay. "My ex-husband works here," I said quietly. "Jake Easton. Our divorce was complicated. I'd prefer to avoid any awkward situations." Steve's eyes widened slightly, and I saw recognition dawn in them. "Jake Easton, you're Clara Easton. I remember now." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "You were married to Jake. I met you briefly at a company barbecue a few years ago." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Yes, that's right." "I see. That does complicate things." Steve was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. May I ask what kind of complications we're talking about? Without getting too personal, of course. I took a deep breath. Jake had an affair with a coworker, Eliza Dawson. She got pregnant. They're married now. It's been 3 years since our divorce, but I'd still prefer to avoid any awkward encounters. Steve's expression hardened slightly. Eliza Dawson worked here briefly in sales. She was let go about 2 years ago for performance and attitude issues. He paused, studying my face. And Jake works at our main showroom branch across town, so you wouldn't encounter him in the corporate building here. For what it's worth, Clara, I think you're exactly what our accounting department needs. Would you be willing to try a hybrid arrangement? You could work from home most days, but come in when needed for team meetings and important presentations. I blinked in surprise. You'd be willing to work around my personal situation? Good employees are hard to find, and great employees are even rarer. Your references speak volumes about your abilities. Steve's expression was serious now. Besides, personal complications shouldn't prevent someone from having the career they deserve. Something warm spread through my chest at his words. When was the last time someone had talked about what I deserved in terms of my career? My future. Let's focus on your qualifications, Steve continued. Tell me about your experience with payroll systems. The next hour flew by as Steve questioned me on everything from tax compliance to financial reporting software. His questions were sharp and challenging, but not intimidating. If anything, I found myself enjoying the intellectual sparring match. It had been a long time since someone had engaged with my professional abilities at this level. Impressive, Steve said when we finished. You're exactly what we need. How does head of accounting sound? With a hybrid remote work arrangement and a salary that I think you'll find very competitive? He slid a contract across the desk, and my eyes widened at the figure. It was more than I'd dared to hope for. I'd like you to meet your team before you leave, Steve continued, standing up. Austin, Anna, and Lena. They're all good people, though they've been struggling without proper leadership. He led me down the hall to a smaller office where 3 people looked up from their computers. A young man with glasses who looked stressed, and 2 women who seemed relieved to see us. Everyone, this is Clara David, our new accounting head. Clara, this is Austin, Anna, and Lena. The introductions were warm, and I could immediately sense the team's eagerness for guidance. When Austin started explaining a balancing issue they'd been struggling with for weeks, I found myself leaning forward with interest. Can you show me the documents? I asked. Austin pulled up the files on his computer, and within minutes, I spotted the discrepancy, a simple coding error that had been throwing off their entire reconciliation. There, I said, pointing to the screen. You've got this expense coded to the wrong department. Move it here, and everything should balance. The relief on Austin's face was immediate. Oh my God, you're right. How did you see that so quickly? Experience, I said with a smile. And fresh eyes sometimes see what tired ones miss. I'll have IT set up your email and remote access, Steve said. You can start Monday if that works for you. I left the office feeling better than I had in months. For the first time since my divorce, I felt truly excited about my future. This job could be exactly what I needed to take my career to the next level. And Steve Mansfield seemed like exactly the kind of boss I could work with. Intelligent, fair, and apparently unconcerned with the messy details of my past. The following Monday, a company-wide email went out announcing my appointment. Please join us in welcoming Clara David as our new head of accounting. Clara brings extensive experience in financial management and will be overseeing all accounting operations effective immediately. Simple, professional, no photo. Just my name and new title. Even if Jake saw the email, there was little chance he'd connect Clara David to his ex-wife, Clara Easton. After all, David had been my maiden name, and it had been 3 years since our divorce. Working for Mansfield Motors turned out to be everything I'd hoped for and more. The accounting department was indeed a mess when I started, but it was the kind of organized chaos I thrived on. Within the first month, I'd implemented new systems, streamlined reporting processes, and caught several significant errors that saved the company thousands of dollars. My team, Austin, Anna, and Lena, were eager to learn and grateful for real leadership. Working remotely most of the time meant I could focus on the big picture without office distractions, and my monthly meetings with Steve gave me the perfect opportunity to present my progress and plans. What I hadn't expected was how much I looked forward to those meetings. Steve was unlike any boss I'd ever had. He listened to my suggestions, implemented my recommendations without micromanaging, and trusted my expertise completely. More than that, he was genuinely interested in my ideas, often asking follow-up questions that showed he was thinking strategically about the company's future. "Your cost analysis on the Phoenix location was brilliant," he said during our third monthly meeting, leaning back in his chair with a coffee mug in his hands. "Have you considered what it would look like if we applied that same methodology to all our satellite locations?" I felt that familiar flush of pride that came from being truly heard. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. I could create a comprehensive audit system that would standardize reporting across all locations and identify inefficiencies company-wide." "I love it. How much time would you need?" "Give me 2 months, and I'll have a complete proposal ready." Steve smiled, and something in his expression made my pulse quicken. "This is exactly why I knew you were right for this job." As the months passed, our meetings grew longer, more frequent. Steve would call with quick questions that turned into hour-long strategy discussions. He started dropping by my apartment to deliver documents that couldn't wait for email, always accepting my offer of coffee and staying longer than necessary. 6 months into the job, I was reviewing quarterly reports at my kitchen table when there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I'd grown used to Steve's impromptu visits. When I opened the door, he stood there holding a bottle of wine and wearing a slightly sheepish expression. "I brought celebratory wine," he said, holding up the bottle. "Your Phoenix proposal was approved by the board. They want to implement it company-wide starting next quarter." My heart soared. "Really? They approved the whole thing?" "Every single recommendation. They were incredibly impressed." Steve's smile was radiant. "You're going to save the company over $2 million annually. I thought that deserved better than a phone call." I invited him in, and we opened the wine to toast my success. But as we sat on my couch, the conversation gradually shifted from work to more personal topics. "Can I ask you something?" Steve said, setting down his wine glass. "What happened with your marriage? I mean, I know the basics, but Jake always seemed like a decent guy. I'm having trouble reconciling that with someone who would cheat on his wife." I was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. The wine had loosened my tongue, and Steve's genuine concern made me want to be honest. "I think I made myself too small," I said finally. I was so focused on being the perfect wife that I forgot to be an interesting person. Jake used to say he loved how supportive I was, how I never caused drama, but I think what he really meant was that I was boring. "That's ridiculous," Steve said firmly. "You're one of the most fascinating people I know." Something in his tone made me look up sharply. He was watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Steve, I know this is complicated," he said quietly, leaning closer. "With the company, with your past. But Clara, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that first interview." My heart was racing. "You're my boss. I'm aware of the complications." His voice was soft, but his eyes never left mine. "But I'm also aware that you're brilliant, beautiful, and absolutely nothing like the broken woman Jake left behind." When he kissed me, it was nothing like the comfortable, familiar kisses I'd shared with Jake. This was fire and promise, and the feeling that I was exactly where I belonged. "This is crazy," I whispered against his lips. "The best things usually are," he replied, pulling me closer. 8 months later, we were engaged. Steve proposed on a weekend trip to Napa Valley, in a vineyard at sunset, with a ring that took my breath away. When I said yes through happy tears, he spun me around and whispered in my ear, "I can't wait to make you Mrs. Mansfield." Mrs. Mansfield. Clara Mansfield. It had a perfect ring to it. We were married 6 months later in a ceremony that was everything my first wedding hadn't been. Joyful, passionate, filled with people who genuinely loved and supported us. The intimate beachside ceremony in Hawaii was perfect, with just our closest family and friends watching as we exchanged vows with the Pacific Ocean as our backdrop. As I walked down the sandy aisle towards Steve, I caught sight of myself in his eyes and barely recognized the confident, radiant woman staring back at me. This was who I was meant to be, not Jake's apologetic ex-wife, but Steve's equal partner. But as we planned our return to work after our honeymoon, a thought occurred to me that made my stomach flip with anticipation rather than dread. "Steve," I said as we lay in bed in our oceanfront suite in Maui, "Jake doesn't know we're married yet, does he?" He grinned. "Nope, we're going to surprise everyone when we get back." "Is he even still working at the company?" "As far as I know. He's kept his head down the past couple of years working at the main showroom branch. I barely see him since the corporate and showroom buildings are separate." I thought about Jake's betrayal, about all the times I'd felt small and worthless and disposable. Now I was Clara Mansfield, head of accounting and wife to the VP of operations. "This is going to be interesting," I murmured. Steve pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. Interesting is one word for it. I prefer poetic justice. 1 year after our Hawaiian honeymoon, I surprised Steve with an announcement over breakfast. "I want to move into the corner office," I said, setting down my coffee cup with determination. Steve looked up from his newspaper, eyebrows raised. "You mean work from the office full-time? Are you sure about that?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling the confidence that had grown steadily since our wedding. "I don't care if Jake sees me, Steve. I'm a Mansfield now. It's time I stopped hiding and started acting like the head of accounting I actually am." A slow smile spread across Steve's face. "That's my wife," he said proudly. "When do you want to start?" "Monday." It was perfect timing, really, because that same week, Richard Mansfield called Steve into his office for a conversation that would change everything. "Dad wants to retire," Steve told me that evening, still looking slightly stunned. "He's making me CEO. There's going to be a company-wide celebration party next month at the Grandview Hotel." I nearly dropped my wine glass. "CEO? Steve, that's incredible. He says he's ready to step back, focus on his golf game, and spoiling his future grandchildren." Steve waggled his eyebrows at me, making me blush. "But Clara, he specifically asked if you'd be willing to present the quarterly earnings report at the party. He wants to officially introduce you as the head of accounting to everyone." My heart raced. A company-wide party meant everyone would be there, including Jake and Eliza, if she was still in the picture. "He really wants me to present?" "He loves you, you know," Steve said softly. "He told me today that he's never seen me happier, and he's grateful that I found such a brilliant woman to marry. His exact words were, 'That girl has more brains and class in her little finger than half our management team combined.'" Richard Mansfield had indeed welcomed me into the family with open arms. During our engagement, he'd often joked that Steve had better marry me quickly before some other company tried to poach me. At our wedding, he'd given a toast about how proud he was that his son had found someone who challenged him to be better. "So," Steve continued, settling beside me on the couch, "what do you say? Ready to make your grand debut as Mrs. Mansfield?" I thought about all the pain and humiliation Jake and Eliza had put me through 4 years ago, about the cruel messages and the smug satisfaction they'd taken in destroying my marriage, about how they'd made me feel like I was nothing, nobody, easily discarded. "Oh, I'm ready," I said with a smile that was probably a little too sharp. "I'm very ready." The next Monday, I walked into Mansfield Motors' corporate building carrying my laptop bag and wearing my best suit. The corner office was everything Steve had promised, spacious, bright, with a view of the city that made me feel like I was on top of the world. Austin, Anna, and Lena were thrilled to have me working alongside them full-time. Within a week, we'd streamlined 3 major processes and caught an error that could have cost the company thousands. I carefully avoided the showroom building where Jake worked, but the corporate building was my domain now. I belonged here. I had earned my place here through hard work and talent, not through who I was married to, though being married to the future CEO certainly didn't hurt. 2 weeks into my new office arrangement, I was reviewing monthly reports when Austin knocked on my door. "Clara? There's someone here to see you. Says he's from the showroom." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "Send him in." But it wasn't Jake who walked through my door. It was Tom from the service department, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking nervous. Mrs. Mansfield, he said, clearly practicing the new title. These are from all of us in the service department. We wanted to thank you for catching that billing error last month. The commission correction you implemented is going to save all of us a lot of money. I felt tears prick my eyes. That's so thoughtful, Tom. Thank you. We just wanted you to know how much we appreciate having someone who actually cares about getting things right. He shifted awkwardly. And congratulations on the marriage. Mr. Steve is a lucky man. After Tom left, I sat in my corner office, surrounded by flowers and the view of the city I'd grown to love. This was my life now. Not the small, apologetic existence I'd had with Jake, but something bigger, brighter, more meaningful. The party was only 2 weeks away, and I had a presentation to prepare. Richard wanted a comprehensive overview of the company's financial health, and I was determined to make it flawless. After all, it would be my formal introduction, not just as the head of accounting, but as the new CEO's wife. Jake and Eliza had no idea what was coming for them. The Grandview Hotel's ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and enough elegance to make anyone feel important. I stood near the entrance with Steve and Richard, greeting business partners and key clients as they arrived for the celebration. I was wearing my best dress, a stunning navy blue number that Steve had bought me for our anniversary, paired with the diamond earrings Richard had given me as a wedding gift. My wedding ring caught the light every time I moved my hand, the enormous diamond impossible to miss. "You look absolutely radiant, my dear," Richard said, patting my arm affectionately. "I can't wait to show off my brilliant daughter-in-law to everyone." Steve squeezed my other hand. "Ready for this?" Before I could answer, I spotted 2 familiar figures walking through the entrance, and my stomach clenched. Not with the old pain, but with anticipation. Jake looked uncomfortable in his ill-fitting suit, while Eliza wore a tight red dress that seemed to be trying too hard. They had a toddler with them, Jacob Jr., now about 3 years old. And from the looks of it, they were struggling. Their clothes looked nice, but Eliza's was the only one wearing something that looked expensive. And there was a weariness to Jake that spoke of financial stress and mounting problems. I watched as they handed their coats to the coat check, Jake looking around the elegant ballroom with what appeared to be intimidation. This wasn't his world anymore, if it ever had been. "I'll be right back," I murmured to Steve and Richard, straightening my shoulders as Jake and Eliza made their way into the main ballroom. It took them a few minutes to spot me. I was standing near the bar, chatting with Bill Patterson and his wife about a new project, when I saw Eliza's eyes land on me across the room. I watched confusion flicker across her face, followed by something that looked like predatory interest. They approached slowly, Jake hanging back while Eliza led the way with Jacob Jr. on her hip. Well, Eliza said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "If it isn't Clara David, what are you doing here? Did they hire you to cater the event?" I smiled calmly, noting how much older she looked. The stress of parenthood and probably financial struggles had not been kind to her. "Actually, I work here. I'm the head of accounting." Eliza's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Head of accounting? How convenient. I suppose they needed someone desperate enough to work for whatever scraps they offered." Her eyes swept over my dress and jewelry with barely concealed envy. "Though you certainly dress well for someone on an accountant's salary." Jake finally spoke, his voice quiet and strained. "Clara, you look good." I could see him taking in my appearance, the confidence in my posture, the quality of my clothes, the obvious upgrade in my entire presence since our divorce. There was something in his eyes that might have been regret. "Thank you," I said simply. Eliza wasn't done. "It must be so lonely, though. Still single after all these years? Some women just aren't cut out for lasting relationships, I suppose." She bounced Jacob Jr. on her hip, the child looking around the ballroom with wide eyes. "At least you have your spreadsheets to keep you company." But then her eyes caught the light reflecting off my left hand, and her words died in her throat. She stared at my wedding ring, the massive diamond that probably cost more than their annual income. "What?" she started, her voice faltering for the first time. "What is that?" Jake's eyes followed hers, and I saw his face go pale when he spotted the ring. "You're married?" he asked, and there was something in his voice. Hurt? Jealousy? Disbelief? Before I could answer, the sound system crackled to life and Richard's voice filled the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." I smiled at Jake and Eliza, both of whom looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Excuse me. I need to get ready for my presentation." As I walked toward the front of the room, I could feel their eyes burning into my back. The entire company was gathered now. Sales staff, managers, mechanics, everyone who made Mansfield Motors run. And they were all about to learn exactly who I really was. Richard stood on the small stage at the front of the ballroom, beaming with pride. "Thank you all for being here tonight. As you know, this celebration marks a new chapter for Mansfield Motors. After 35 wonderful years, I'm ready to step down and pass the torch to someone I trust completely, my son, Steve Mansfield, your new CEO." Applause filled the room as Steve joined his father on stage. From where I stood at the side of the room, I could see Jake and Eliza in the crowd, still looking confused and shaken. "But before Steve says a few words," Richard continued, "I want to introduce someone very special. Over the past 2 years, our company's financial performance has improved dramatically, thanks to the brilliant work of our head of accounting. She's streamlined our processes, caught errors that saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars, and brought a level of professionalism to our financial department that has impressed even our most demanding clients." My heart was racing as Richard's eyes found mine across the room. "But she's not just an exceptional employee," Richard said, his voice warm with affection. "She's also the woman who made my son the happiest man alive. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our head of accounting and my daughter-in-law, Mrs. Clara Mansfield." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, applause began to build as the implications of Richard's words sank in. I walked onto the stage, my chin held high, and took the microphone from Richard with steady hands. From the stage, I could see Jake's face clearly. He looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Eliza had gone completely white, her mouth hanging open in disbelief, Jacob Jr. squirming in her arms as she forgot to hold him properly. I smiled, the confident smile I'd learned to wear so well, and began to speak. "Thank you for that warm welcome. I'm thrilled to share our quarterly earnings with you tonight, and to be part of the Mansfield Motors family in every sense of the word." The presentation went flawlessly. I delivered the quarterly report with confidence, outlining record profits and improved efficiency that had everyone in the room impressed. But I could feel Jake and Eliza's eyes burning into me the entire time, their shock and disbelief palpable even from the stage. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Steve stepped forward and kissed me on the cheek, a simple, sweet gesture that sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. The CEO kissing the head of accounting was one thing, but now everyone understood exactly what they were witnessing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve said into the microphone, his arm around my waist, "I hope you'll join me in celebrating not just our company's success, but my incredible wife, who has transformed our financial operations in just 2 years." As we left the stage together, I caught sight of Jake and Eliza near the back of the room. Jake was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret? Maybe? Longing? Eliza, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and introductions. Employees who had only known me as a voice on conference calls were eager to meet the woman who had not only impressed them professionally, but had also captured their new CEO's heart. "Mrs. Mansfield," said Sarah from sales, shaking my hand enthusiastically, "my husband and I just wanted to say how much we admire you. Steve's been happier than we've ever seen him. And the profit-sharing bonuses this quarter were amazing," added Tom from service. "Whatever you did with our numbers, it worked." I smiled and thanked them, but part of me was still tracking Jake and Eliza's movements across the room. They seemed to be having a heated, whispered conversation near the bar. Eliza gesticulating angrily while Jake kept glancing in my direction. Finally, as the evening was winding down, Jake approached me while Steve was talking to some business partners. "Clara," he said quietly, his voice strained, Could I speak with you for a moment?" I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in 4 years, he looked older, more worn down, There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we were married, and his clothes, while clean, were clearly showing their age. The confident man I'd once been married to seemed diminished somehow. "What do you want, Jake?" I wanted to say congratulations. He swallowed hard. You look incredible. Happy. I am happy. I'm glad, he said, though his tone suggested he was anything but. I know I don't have the right to ask, but do you love him? The question caught me off guard. Why would you ask me that? Because I need to know that you're not doing this just to hurt me, that you're not throwing your life away on some revenge fantasy. I stared at him in disbelief. Even now, even after everything, he still thought my life revolved around him. Revenge fantasy? Jake, I met Steve through work. I fell in love with him because he's kind, intelligent, and treats me like I'm worth something. This has nothing to do with you. But the timing is what it is, I cut him off. Just because you destroyed our marriage doesn't mean I was going to sit around waiting for you to realize your mistake. Jake flinched. Clara, I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong, but seeing you here tonight, married to him. He gestured toward Steve. It just makes me realize what I lost. You didn't lose me, Jake. You threw me away. There's a difference. Before he could respond, Eliza appeared at his side, her face flushed with what I could only assume was anger and humiliation, still carrying her son. Well, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. Mrs. Mansfield, how convenient that you forgot to mention your little promotion when we were chatting earlier. You didn't ask, I replied calmly. This is ridiculous, Eliza continued, her voice getting louder and attracting attention from nearby guests. You're telling me that in just a few years, you went from a pathetic divorced woman living alone to married to the CEO? How exactly did that happen? Several people nearby had started to notice the commotion, their conversations quieting as they turned to watch. Eliza, Jake warned quietly, maybe we should. No, she snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. I want to know how someone like her managed to land someone like him. What did you do, Clara? Sleep your way to the top? The accusation hung in the air like a poison cloud. I felt my cheeks burn with anger, but before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. I'm sorry, what did you just say about my wife? Steve appeared beside me, his voice deadly quiet but carrying clearly across the suddenly silent section of the ballroom. His face was calm, but I could see the fury in his eyes. Eliza's face went white as she realized who she was talking to. Mr. Mansfield, I didn't mean. You didn't mean to accuse my wife of sleeping her way into her position? Steve's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath it, because that's exactly what it sounded like. Steve, I said quietly, putting my hand on his arm. It's okay. No, it's not okay, he replied, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. Miss Dawson, isn't it? I remember you from a few years ago. You worked in sales briefly before being terminated because of your poor performance and this type of awful behavior. Eliza nodded mutely, clearly remembering her unceremonious exit from the company. Let me be very clear about something, Steve continued. My wife was hired because she's the most talented accountant this company has ever employed. She saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars, improved our efficiency, and earned the respect of everyone she works with. I fell in love with her because she's brilliant, beautiful, and has more integrity in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. The gathering crowd was hanging on every word now. As for your insinuation, Steve's voice grew colder, I suggest you think very carefully about your next words. Because right now, you're standing at a company event, publicly insulting the wife of your former employer, which sounds an awful lot like grounds for a lawsuit. Eliza's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Jake grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away, but she wasn't done yet. This is insane, she said desperately, her voice cracking. Jake, tell them what she was like when you left her. She was pathetic, broken. There's no way she could have. That's enough, Steve said sharply. You need to leave, now. You can't do this. Eliza protested as hotel security began to approach, alerted by the disturbance. This is a public event. It's a private company event, Steve replied calmly, and you're no longer welcome. Security will escort you out. As security approached, all eyes turned to Jake, who stood frozen in the middle of the chaos, clearly wishing he could disappear. As for you, Mr. Easton, Steve continued, I suggest you think very carefully about whether you want to continue working for a company where the CEO's wife is your former spouse. Because while I won't fire you for something that happened before my time, I also won't tolerate any further disrespect toward my wife. Jake nodded quickly, his face red with embarrassment. Yes, sir, of course, sir. I apologize. Don't apologize to me, Steve said. Apologize to my wife. Jake turned to me, his eyes filled with something that might have been genuine remorse. Clara, I'm sorry. For tonight and for everything. I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had once been my entire world, who had broken my heart so completely I thought I'd never recover. And I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no satisfaction at his obvious misery. Just nothing. Goodbye, Jake, I said quietly. As Jake walked away with slumped shoulders, Steve turned to me, his expression immediately softening. Are you okay? I looked around the ballroom at all the faces watching us. Some curious, some sympathetic, some clearly impressed by the drama they'd just witnessed. Then I looked at my husband, this incredible man who had just publicly defended me without hesitation. I'm perfect, I said, and meant it completely. Steve smiled and pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Come on, Mrs. Mansfield, let's go home. As we walked out of the ballroom together, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall by the exit. The woman looking back at me bore no resemblance to the broken, humiliated person Jake had left behind 4 years ago. This woman was confident, successful, loved. This woman was exactly who I was meant to be. The ride home from the Grandview Hotel was suffocating. Jake gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white, while Eliza sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Jacob Jr. was finally asleep in his car seat, exhausted from the evening. Turn off the phone, Jake said through gritted teeth. I'm just checking my... Turn it off, Eliza. The silence that followed was worse than her chatter. Jake's mind raced with the humiliation of the evening. His ex-wife, his brilliant, successful ex-wife, was now married to his boss. No, not just his boss, the CEO, and Eliza had just accused her of sleeping her way to the top. In front of the entire company. They pulled into the driveway of their modest 2-bedroom house, the house they could barely afford even with both their incomes. Except now, Eliza didn't have an income anymore. Well, that was a disaster, Eliza said casually, gathering her purse. I can't believe she married Steve Mansfield. Talk about calculated. Jake turned to stare at her. Calculated? Eliza, do you have any idea what you just did? What? I told the truth. There's no way someone like Clara could land someone like him without. Without what? Without being smart, without being talented, without being everything you're not? Jake's voice was rising, and he fought to keep it down so he wouldn't wake Jacob Jr. Eliza's face hardened. Excuse me? You just cost me my job, Eliza. Do you understand that? I can't work there anymore. Not after tonight. Oh, please, you're being dramatic. I'm being dramatic? Jake exploded, then immediately lowered his voice. You accused the CEO's wife of prostitution at a company event in front of everyone. I didn't say prostitution. You implied it, and now I have to find a new job because you cannot keep your mouth shut. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. Do you know how much money I'll lose? Huh? We're already struggling with the mortgage, your credit card bills, Jacob's daycare. My credit card bills. Eliza's voice turned shrill. Those are necessities, Jake. I need clothes for work, things for Jacob. You don't have work anymore, and half the stuff you buy is designer nonsense we can't afford. Jake pulled out his phone, scrolling through their bank account. Look at this, $300 at Nordstrom last week. For what? A dress for tonight. A dress you wore to humiliate us both. Jake slammed his hand on the steering wheel. And what about Jacob? When was the last time you actually took care of him instead of dumping him on me or my parents? Eliza crossed her arms defensively. I take care of him. You hand him off the second you get home from whatever you've been doing all day. You don't cook, you don't clean, you don't help with bedtime. I work all day and then come home to take care of everything while you max out credit cards with money we don't have. That's not. It stops now, Jake said firmly. Your credit cards are bankrupting us, Eliza. The minimum payments alone are more than our mortgage. And now you just cost me my job. Eliza's face went pale. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I can't show my face at that office anymore, do you understand that? That was my career, my livelihood, and you destroyed it tonight. Jake's voice was shaking with rage. I gave up everything for you. My marriage, my integrity, my future. And for what? So you could spend money we don't have and humiliate me in front of my colleagues? I fucking regret leaving Clara over you. Jake, what? You're overreacting. No, I'm finally reacting appropriately. Jake unbuckled his seatbelt. We're done, Eliza. I want you out. What? Eliza's voice cracked. You don't mean that. I mean every word. This marriage is over. Jake said. Eliza's composure finally shattered. Tears started streaming down her face as the reality hit her. Jake, please. You can't leave me. I have nowhere to go. I don't have a job. You should have thought about that before tonight. I regret marrying you. Please, I'm sorry. I was jealous, okay? Seeing Clara like that, so successful, so perfect. Eliza was sobbing now, her mascara running. I felt so small, so worthless. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You've been hurting me for years with your selfishness, your spending, your complete lack of responsibility. Jake's voice was cold. And tonight was the final straw. What about Jacob? What about our family? Eliza reached for his arm desperately. Jake pulled away. Our family? You mean the family where you dump our son on me every chance you get? Where you spend money we don't have, while I work myself to death trying to pay your stupid credit card bills? That family? I can change. I swear I can change. Eliza was practically hyperventilating now. Don't leave me, Jake. Please. I love you. No, you don't. You love what I provide. You love having someone to pay your bills and clean up your messes. But you don't love me, and you certainly don't love our son enough to actually be a mother to him. Jake got out of the car, got Jacob, and carried him to the house. Eliza scrambled after him, still crying. Jake, wait, we can work this out. I'll get a job, I'll stop spending, I'll be better. It's too late, Eliza. I'm filing for divorce next week, and I'm seeking full custody of Jacob. You can't take my son away from me. Jake turned around, his face hard. Watch me. Any judge will see that I'm the one who's been raising him while you've been playing dress-up with credit cards we can't afford. Eliza collapsed against the front door, sobbing uncontrollably. Please don't do this. I'll have nothing. I'll be nothing. You already are nothing, Jake said quietly, and walked inside, leaving her crying on the doorstep. 6 months later, Jake sat in his new apartment, a cramped one-bedroom place that was all he could afford after the divorce. Jake's parents had been devastated when they learned the full extent of what had happened. They'd always loved Clara, had considered her the daughter they'd never had. Margaret had cried when Jake told them about the divorce from Clara, and again when she met Eliza and saw what kind of person had replaced their beloved daughter-in-law. When the marriage to Eliza fell apart, they weren't surprised. They'd watched Jake struggle to keep up with her spending, seen how she neglected Jacob, witnessed her complete lack of responsibility. But they were heartbroken for their grandson, who would grow up without a stable mother figure. His father, Robert, had been particularly harsh in his judgment. You threw away a woman who would have given you everything for someone who only knew how to take, he'd said. Clara was family to us. That woman never was, and never could be. Now they helped with their grandson whenever Jake needed support, but their disappointment in their son's choices hung heavy in every conversation. They'd seen the business announcement about Clara's success, her marriage to Steve Mansfield, and it only reinforced their belief that Jake had made the biggest mistake of his life. 2 years have passed since that night at the Grandview Hotel. Steve and I have just bought our dream house with a garden and a library. My career at Mansfield Motors continues to flourish, and our marriage is everything I never knew I wanted, built on mutual respect, genuine love, and partnership. Sometimes I think about Jake and wonder how different things might have been. But those thoughts pass quickly, replaced by gratitude for the life I actually have. The woman I used to be feels like a stranger now. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, capable of building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. And that is the sweetest justice of all.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.